So they say never to talk about religion or politics in public. So let's talk about money instead. How much money do you think we should pay in taxes for things to be considered fair as a society here in the US? And how much money should you make in order to be considered the richest 1%? So that's what we'll talk about, and the future of our taxes under the two potentially different presidents. What would happen if President Donald Trump gets reelected, and what could happen if Mr. Joe Biden becomes our next president? I feel like this was not covered in the presidential elections enough, and I think this is super important regardless of how much money you make. It's just not something we talk about in public because it can sometimes get really awkward, so I decided to make this YouTube channel instead. So the solution is easy. Tax the rich. Excuse me. I'm speaking. Let's begin. Shh. Hi, my name is Andrei Jikh. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're feeling well, and I want to ask you a question. How much money do you think you need to make per year to be considered the richest 1% here in America? Do you think it starts at 6 figures per year? Is it $200,000 per year? Is it $250,000 per year? Because the presidential Democratic nominee, Mr. Joe Biden, has made a very clear definition of what that means. The threshold starts at earning $400,000 per year. Now, if you can make 400 grand per year, that's the same as making $1,538 per day, $205 per hour, or $33,333 per month. If you can make that much money, you are by definition considered the rich. Now, technically speaking, you're still not in the richest 1% just yet. At $400K per year, that would put you in the top 1.8%. But to Joe Biden's point, that group of people, the top 1.8%ers, are responsible for earning 25% of the entirety of earned income here in the United States. If you want to be considered in the top 1%, the true richest of the rich, nationally, you need to make $515,000 per year. So regardless of how much money you make, let's talk about the future of our taxes under the two potential presidents. So let's assume that Mr. Joe Biden is going to become our next president. What's cool is that Mr. Joe wants to give everybody $15,000 of tax credits for first-time home buyers. And that's pretty cool because I'm a first-time home buyer. But what this also means that people may not realize is that real estate prices will go up across the board for everybody, which also means that you will take on more debt and as a result pay more in interest over time. But if you're a parent and you have kids, really good news, because the CTC, the Child Tax Care Credit, is actually at $2,000 right now per child, but it will be increased under Joe Biden's plan to $3,600 or $300 per month for each child ages 5 and under, and $3,000 per year ages 6 and over but under 17 for basically as long as the pandemic lasts. In addition to all of that, Mr. Joe Biden wants to include a refundable tax credit for paying our health insurance premiums. And the premiums are what we pay every month for health insurance. And the reason I explain it is because it took me forever to figure out the difference between deductibles and premiums, and we can use that monthly premium to write off some of our taxes, which is nice. But if you're a college student, the most amazing news, because if you live in a household that makes less than $125,000 per year, Mr. Joe Biden wants to let you go to a public university for free for up to 4 years. Where was this when I was going to college? Now, there's some potential drawbacks to this as well, and the three main areas are in individual income, payroll taxes, and capital gains. So if you make less than $400,000 per year, which is 98% of people here in the US, your taxes will not go up by one bit. But if you make more than that, then you might be in trouble. Because for your individual income, it could go back up to 39.6%. Now that is for your earned income. But for payroll taxes, if you make more than $400,000 per year, you will automatically be paying an additional 12.4% in Social Security payroll taxes. Now what that basically means is that Graham Stephan would pay 39.6% from his individual income, plus 13.3% for living in California, plus the 12.4% Social Security payroll taxes from Mr. Joe Biden. And that means that for every $1 million that Graham Stephan makes, he will pay more than half of that towards the government. Now, side note, this new payroll tax is actually kind of interesting because normally we're told that payroll taxes are paid by our employer and by ourselves, split exactly down the middle. But the truth is a little bit more nuanced than that. Because according to researchers from taxfoundation.org, the people who actually pay for those taxes is us, the employees. And that's because the market determines who gets those tax burdens through a concept called relative price elasticities. And what that means is, I can finally explain a nuanced concept in economics using rubber band magic. Hold on. And this is the economy right here. It's this elastic band that stretches depending on supply and demand. So you can see the dollar moves up and down depending on what's going on in the economy. But that's assuming that we don't get a deflationary collapse like that. Also, that's a complete lie. That doesn't explain anything. That was just me trying to show off my rubber band magic. All right, so relative price elasticity is actually pretty simple to understand. What it means is how much you want something in comparison to how much it changes in price. So for example, I'm a nerd and I love to buy Pokemon cards and collect them, until I found out that Logan Paul bought all the first edition PSA 9 Pokemon cards along with a base set Shadowless booster box for almost $200,000. What that did to the Pokemon market is it increased the price like crazy, and it decreased my interest to buy those Pokemon cards because I have no interest in paying Logan Paul prices. But this concept applies to everything in economics, from employment to taxes. And your desire to find a job is less susceptible to taxes than a company's desire to give you said job. I know that makes no sense, but think about it like this. When you go and get a job, you don't really have much of a say or control about how much you get paid, right? Like, beyond negotiating a little bit with the company, for the most part, it's the market that decides how much to pay us. And that's because of a simple concept called supply and demand. But it turns out that there's a lot more supply of people wanting to go get a job than there is a demand from those corporations to hire said people for those jobs. And so when the government decides to increase something like payroll taxes, for example, those companies are more sensitive to those tax increases, so they have to pull some sort of a variable, and that variable is almost always how much they pay us. So the next time you think about paying your payroll taxes and that dreaded 7.65% that then your employer also pays 7.65% to the government, technically speaking, it's you who paid for both of those things, because that cost was already passed on to you as a tax in the form of decreased wages. It's an invisible tax that we don't get to see. And that's really important, because the next time the government promises you that they won't increase our individual income tax rates, increasing other forms of taxes means that somebody has to pay for those taxes at some point somewhere, and that person is usually ourselves. Now, if you're an investor in the stock market, you should know that corporate taxes will be going up from 21% up to 28%. But who cares about that? I'm not a rich corporation, right? That's actually wrong, because when corporations have less money for themselves, they have less money to pay back their shareholders in the form of dividends, or have less money to fund their own growth. Which means if you have a 401k or an IRA or a retirement plan that has anything to do with the stock market, you will generally see less of a return with this policy. It's not all bad though, because he also wants to increase taxes on foreign income for those corporations, which will hopefully encourage them to bring back jobs to the United States, which also brings us to the third tax rate increase, which is capital gains. Now, that is money that you make when you sell a stock, but Mr. Joe Biden wants to get rid of the entire capital gains tax structure in favor of taxing stocks like earned income. So it will go from 23.8% all the way to 43.4%. That is massive. That represents years and years, if not decades of growth in the stock market wiped away under this tax policy. The next thing Mr. Joe Biden wants to get rid of is something called the step up in basis. And what that affects are kids that inherit things from their parents at the time of passing. So for example, if you inherit an asset like a house from your parents, you get to inherit an asset that has grown in value over their entire lifetime and pay little to no taxes upon receiving it. But under Mr. Joe Biden's plan, you will actually pay taxes the same as if they were forced to sell that asset at the time of their passing. This means you'll pay taxes on the difference between what your parents bought the asset for and what you've received them at the time of the forced sale. So technically, if you don't have enough money to cover the taxes, you might have to sell those assets permanently just to afford the taxes on those assets. Lucky for me, I don't have to pay any of that stuff because I come from a first-gen broke immigrant family. Yes! One of the perks of being poor. But also, a lot of wealthy people are going to be talking about life insurance money because that money doesn't actually get taxed the same as the ordinary income. So if Mr. Donald Trump gets reelected, here's the good news of what would happen. He actually wants to decrease taxes from 22% down to 15% for individual income tax rates for people making anywhere between $40,001 all the way to $441,451. And the other thing I really like is that they're bouncing around an idea of giving people that invest in the stock market an increase in cost basis in relation to inflation, which I realize sounds insanely complicated, but it's really simple. Let's say you're investing in the stock market and you put in $1,000 and then 10 years later, cha-ching, it doubled in value and now it's worth $2,000. So with this idea, your cost basis of your original investment would be increased by the amount of inflation that happened. So for example, if in the last 10 years, 20% was how much the economy inflated by, you would apply that 20% toward your original investment of $1,000. So now your original cost basis, instead of being $1,000, is now $1,200. And so when you go to sell that $2,000 worth, you would subtract the difference between that $2,000 and the original cost basis of $1,200 to get $800, which is how much you'd be paying taxes on instead of the $1,000. Does that make any sense? Nope. Hit the J button twice, go back 20 seconds, and it should be more clear. Now, the bad news about Mr. Donald Trump's tax policy is that, yes, it benefits some of the middle class. For the most part, it benefits the wealthy class, which of course, no surprise. But what might be a surprise is knowing who pays the most amount in taxes. And that actually belongs to the wealthy, which is interesting because you might have heard that the wealthy pay a lower rate. And while that's true to some degree, they actually pay the most amount of money in terms of the overall amount to funding society, which is interesting because we hear that all the time on the news.
The wealthy evade taxes, they don't pay their fair share.
But actually, it's the media pinning us against each other in order to get more clicks, more views, and make more money. Not much different than any other YouTube video you might watch. So the takeaway is that the biggest potential change is for people that are invested in the stock market and for people who are making more than $400,000 per year. So if you make less, your taxes will not be affected. And remember, these promises and proposals are exactly that. They're just proposals from these politicians, and that even if we get a new president, it doesn't really mean anything until Congress goes through multiple revisions of all of these plans. And right now we both know what happens in Congress when a new bill is introduced. This is how they respond. Either way you look at it, our current tax code is really broken because it was invented when we didn't travel as much and when the internet didn't really exist. So if you want to nerd out about taxes and why they should be changed, I will leave a link down in the description below that makes a really good point for why we need to modernize our tax system. It's a really good read. In the meantime, Webull is running a limited time promotion where if you use my link down below and if you fund your account $100, you'll get 2 free stocks, each valued no less than $8 a piece, and up to $1,600 each. And if you don't like the app, just withdraw your $100 and then you'll still get to keep your 2 free stocks. Just make sure to keep it in there for at least a few weeks. That way they don't take those stocks back. You can get a 3rd free stock from Robinhood. You can join me on Discord. It's free. We talk about investing, politics, and everything we're not supposed to. You can follow me on Instagram. I post from time to time. You can send me free stuff if you want. I don't know why you would. P.O. box down below. Love you. Thank you so much for watching the video. I will see you back here on Monday and Friday. Sometimes a Wednesday. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye. Oh, by the way, the point of this video wasn't to influence your voting decision. I think that when it comes to picking the president, you should take more into consideration than just money and the economy. But I hope I shed some light on the money part anyway. And I hope at least it made you smile and made you learn something. Love you. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.